9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello to my wonderful students. Hope everyone is doing well. Here's some interesting facts on the United States of America, right? So, we had 13 colonies set up by the British, okay? And this is the British area. This was the Spanish area. Spanish had all this. Florida, Texas. French had all this right here. Okay. And we're going to look at why the colonies were forced to fight many wars at this time. It's mainly because the mother countries in Europe forced the colonies to go to war. Okay. Why is this? It was called mercantilism. This was an economic system in which England used the colonies for everything. For resources, food, materials, and war. Okay? The first war England brought the colonies into was called the War of the Spanish Succession. Right? That's what the Europeans called it. The King of Spain died, and the King of France was put in charge of Spanish territory. This caused England to go to war with France. So, pretty much all this became part of France. British and their colonies versus the French, Spanish, and their colonies. This was called Queen Anne's War in the 13 colonies. Queen Anne is also the name of Captain Blackbeard's ship, Queen Anne Revenge. Okay. England would win in Europe, causing Spain to give up much of its territories to England. But the second war was called the War of Jenkins' Ear. In this one, Jenkins was a smuggler who tried to steal stuff in and around Florida, and the Spanish authorities caught him, and they cut off his ear. And what happened was the 13 colonies told Georgia to go to war against Florida, and they lost. As a result, both France, England, and Spain began to set up fortifications all around the New World. Fortresses, actual fortifications. Because the 13 colonies were surrounded, the idea of a militia with weapons was formed. That's why in America you can have weapons. Okay? The third year, the 7 Years' War. Another war broke out between England and France, 1765 through 1763. The 7 Years' War was fought between France and England. Okay. But the Americans called the 7 Years' War the French and Indian War. All these fortresses that were being set up between the French and the British finally caused a war. And the French were advancing into the 13 colonies. And England told George Washington to attack the French in the area of Pennsylvania. And Washington did. Washington marched to Fort Le Boeuf, surrounded it, told the French to leave, and the French didn't. When Washington attacked the French, Washington lost the war, the battle. Washington retreated and created another fort called Fort Necessity, in which Washington lost again. As a result, the French captured the city of Pittsburgh, and they began marching inwards. Eventually, with British help, the Americans did win. But look at this. The French versus the Indians. This is how they used the people, the Native Americans. The French would ally with the Native Americans and the tribes and use them against the British. Meanwhile, the British kind of used the Native Americans. They would actually have to go to war against many tribes. Peace of Paris. In this treaty, France lost the 7 Years' War and signed a peace treaty with England, and the 13 colonies went from this to this. This is all Great Britain territory. This is all England. Notice Spain and Spain. Okay, this was all England now. Benjamin Franklin had an idea that the 13 colonies should govern themselves and deal with their own Indian affairs. But the King of England said, no, that's okay. Native American reaction to the 7 Years' War. Native Americans who allied with France were now forced to work with the British. Many were not happy. And in Pontiac's rebellion, Native Americans joined forces and marched to the English settlements of Detroit and killed many settlers. Pontiac, like the car. The Royal Proclamation Line, as a result that settlers began moving this way and Pontiac's rebellion, the King of England ordered that no American or no British could move west of this line. This line was as far west as settlers could go, and this area was supposed to be Indian territory, Indian Native American territory. Americans were very angry that this happened.